Well, we're in here. There's been some demolition, and we've unveiled some stuff that is not really all that great. So here we are in our little contained booth area. So they started with taking off this first row of tiles here, and when they did, they found out that the insulation and so the tiles here were placed directly over the old drywall, and what they found was that the insulation there in the drywall was pretty well soaked, and so they started pulling off the next row of tiles right here, and that was still wet, and that didn't make a whole lot of sense with us thinking that the leak was going on here. So eventually, obviously, we went all the way up to the window, and despite the fact that, like, we popped this off and you can see that that's really gross in there, it doesn't really seem like that is gross, but it seems like the water that gets in there is eventually ending up outside. But given that we saw pretty extensive leakage around here, we think that the seam here, so this grout seam, had a crack in it and was leaking over here down into the drywall there. So we had probably a leak down here, but also a leak up here. And the question is sort of like what to do about that. Throwing around ideas about just replacing this piece with an actual sill so that it doesn't. They don't really love how it's currently engineered that you have this grout seam here. They would like instead for you to just have like an overhang, sort of like what happens here, so that, you know, water that comes off of it just sort of cascades over. So we're sort of considering getting another piece of the quartz here to put over there, but probably have a discussion with Dan about that on Monday. Obviously, the other surprise that you can even see is that this plywood is still all wet, and we haven't used this shower in 3 or 4 months, maybe more. So that moisture that was getting down there was really stuck, and yeah, just hang around, especially back there. The insulation with the drywall was all moldy. It's just a big mess. So thinking about whether to keep the plywood or not. Might end up replacing that. We're gonna see how it goes when it dries. One nice thing, obviously we had to tear off way more tiles than we expected, but they were coming off quite nicely. All the tiles that they pulled off they think are salvageable, except for the ones right here and then the other one over here. Those had to be broken to get out around the quartz there. So yeah, gonna have to decide. Basically, we're gonna try and seal up the top of the windows, but then also figure out how to tackle that leak scenario there, and then go from there. Dan said that the construction of the basin was sort of not as he would have liked. As he pointed out, like, you can see that the adhesive is just kind of squeezed around in there without really, it's a little bit haphazard. In general, things just seemed a little bit sloppy, like the person wasn't too experienced at building these things. So, I mean, I guess that's what we're here to fix, but comes as a bit of a surprise to us. The other, we were talking, so you can see the heating coil wires here. I had actually forgotten that we had heating coils in the seats as well, because they basically have never really heated up at all, which we assumed was due to the thickness of the quartz, but I think we're just going to leave those alone. But with the wire going into the wall there and probably up and around, we're going to abandon that wire and he's just going to rewire it. So since we have the ceiling available down below because it's a drop, we're just going to come up the wall here, and he's going to run it all across the ceiling there and just come up through the bottom of the floor here to get to the coil mat. And that's the story. Hoping this dries out, and see what we've got on Monday to start a plan for how everything goes back together. Hopefully we don't have any more surprises, because this was already plenty of surprise to find.